Many years ago, deep in the jungles of Africa, so the story goes, a traveler was making a long trek, and men had been hired from the local tribe to help carry the loads. The first day they marched rapidly and went far. The traveler had high hopes of a very quick journey. But the second morning, the tribesmen absolutely refused to move at all. For some strange reason, they just sat perfectly still, motionless. On inquiry as to the reason for this odd behavior, the traveler was informed by the tribesmen that as far as they were concerned, they had gone too fast and too far on the first day, and thus they were now waiting for their souls to catch up with their bodies. Waiting for their souls to catch up with their bodies. Sounds like a good idea. We today live in such fast-paced, hectic, busy times. Do you ever feel like your life is one of just constant, unrelenting, almost frantic activity, and it's overwhelming you? How are we outrunning our souls and it's killing us? This is our topic this morning, learning to slow ourselves down so that our souls might catch up. Or more specifically, developing inner peace, a sense of calm and serenity amidst a very hectic, stress-filled world. Today we continue our study of the great 23rd Psalm, and as you may recall, last week we noted how the opening phrase, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," establishes both the fundamental relationship in which we are best to understand ourselves, namely, we as sheep with God as our shepherd, but also how it establishes the fundamental claim of the text, that is, that with God as our shepherd, our master, we shall not want. That is, everything we need will be provided, we will lack for nothing. Well, the rest of the psalm then becomes an exploration of this basic claim, an examination of how God actually accomplishes this. We get a series of statements, of phrases, describing the nature of the Lord's care and provision, sort of, what we can expect. And the first of these being our text for today, "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." Now, right off the top, this along with the second phrase, "He leadeth me beside the still waters," are statements of God providing the most basic necessities of life, food and water, green pastures and still waters. The author is saying that we can trust that God will provide our most basic needs. A hint to us, perhaps, that far too often our problem is that we're getting all hung up on and worked up over wants and not necessarily needs. But whatever, even more within this, notice how both of these initial phrases of God's activity in our lives also carry with them a nuance suggesting the offering of inner peace specifically. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters." The general understanding is that what the psalmist is doing here, along with establishing the fact that we can trust in God's provision of our most basic needs, is making the point that stillness, a sense of peace and serenity, is just as much a basic need, a necessity of life, maybe even more so. Notice that this is the very first thing that the shepherd is said to offer his flock, to lie down, rest, calm, serenity of spirit, a most basic, a foremost need. And wouldn't most of us agree? That is, as is well known, you can have all of your physical needs met, but if you can't find inner serenity, it's all lost. While conversely, you can be lacking in some way physically or materially, but if your heart is at rest, you're fine. You can handle anything. Notice how all of this is emphasized in the verb used in our text today, "He maketh." This implies, first of all, an element of something somewhat forced. That is, it's not "he inviteth," or "he suggesteth," or "he encourageth," get my tongue twister here. No, "he maketh," an inference of some force and command being implied. In effect, as this is an absolute necessity of our survival, if we do not do this on our own, God will force it upon us. Much the way, say, if you push yourself too much, you will become physically ill. It's how God has designed things, out of love, out of an understanding of our human weakness and limitations. For our survival, if we will not stop and rest on our own, He will make us lie down. Something we have all undoubtedly experienced at some point in our lives. As it has been said, those who will not take time for rest must eventually make time for illness. We as human beings, we tend to praise the person who's constantly on the go, that person, all that energy and drive, when God seems to be saying to us here, I'm afraid you guys got it all backwards. That frantic, unresting behavior is not what you want to emulate. Just the opposite. That person has some issues, Life is not supposed to be that frantic. Building upon this, note also how this verb and the use of force implies, makes it also clear that this is not something natural and easy for us to do. It takes effort. And this, you see, is the other side of this verb, maketh. Along with meaning to apply force, it also means to cause or to enable, to provide the ability to do. And this is the real point here. That as the psalmist is making it clear that developing a sense of calm is absolutely essential to life, so he is also making it clear to us that this is not something we come by naturally. It's something, rather, that we naturally resist. We need help with this, the help the shepherd offers. Returning to the image we began last week, our similarity to sheep. While the psalmist makes the seemingly very simple claim, he maketh me to lie down. Getting sheep to lie down is actually one of the most difficult things to do due to their very nervous, tense, easily agitated nature. Sound familiar? Well, author Philip Keller, in his devotional classic book entitled A Shepherd Looks at the 23rd Psalm, he thinks about this and he writes, "The strange thing about sheep is that because of their nature, it is almost impossible for them to be made to lie down unless 4 requirements are met. First, they must be free of hunger. Sheep will not lie down as long as they feel in need of finding food. Secondly, if tormented by parasites, sheep will not lie down. Only when free of pests can they relax. Third, because of the social behavior within a flock, sheep will not lie down unless they are free from friction with others of their kind. And finally, owing to their timidity, sheep refuse to lie down unless they are free of all fear. The unique aspect of the picture is that it is only the shepherd who can provide release from these irritations. A good shepherd works unceasingly to offer just such aid." This is what I'd like to consider. The 4 requirements needed for sheep to be made to lie down, for us to be able to arrive at a sense of serenity. How the Lord provides for this, and what we need to do to take hold of it. The 4 main requirements of knowing spiritual calm no matter what life throws your way. Requirement number 1, food. As noted, the first thing that must take place before sheep will calm down is they must be fed. Their hunger must be satiated. Their bellies have to be full. As we noted last week, sheep are Methodists, right? They live for food. Thus the Good Shepherd brings them, it says, to green pastures. That's rich, lush, abundant fields. And we can all relate to this somewhat. You know, it's often hard to sleep on an empty, growling stomach. However, beyond the purely physical application at this point, there is the equally important spiritual application, namely, a sense of spiritual calm only comes about through being spiritually well fed. Simply put, the first reason why so many people spend their whole lives continuing anxious and ill at ease, never experiencing real serenity, is because they are starving. Not physically, but spiritually. They don't feed their souls. Understand, the Good Shepherd brings his sheep to lush, green pastures. The Lord provides us with rich, abundant, spiritual food. God feeds us through worship and service and fellowship, but the primary way God feeds us daily is through prayer and Scripture, through communion with him regularly and through feeding upon his word and his presence. Unfortunately, the Lord can put the food in front of us, but he can't make us eat, you know? Imagine going through your whole life starving, right? With that intense, nagging, burning feeling. You'd never be able to do anything well, to focus or to rest. Yet this is exactly what so many do every single day. We feed everything else. Our stomachs, our bank accounts, our day planners, but we don't stop and feed our souls. You know, I've mentioned this in the past, but just because it's so important. Very simple. People who are centered in the Lord are centered in peace, you know? If you're not regularly connected to the source of life, being fed by the Lord through daily, continual prayer and Scripture, you will never know real life. It just gets more and more difficult every day. Have you ever heard the story of a guy who was hired to paint the white line down the center of a new stretch of road? The first day he painted 10 miles, and his employers were amazed. The second day he painted only 5 miles. The third day, only 1 mile. The fourth day, only 50 feet. Distressed over this apparent ever-increasing lack of effort on his part, the employers figured they were going to have to let him go. But before doing so, they called him into the office to ask him what the problem was. And the man's reply? "Well," he said, "honestly, I'm working as hard as I ever have, maybe even harder. It's just that every day I get further and further away from the can of paint." The further you get from the source, the more difficult and frustrating it gets. Hook up. Bring the can with you. One author writes, you ever wonder about the abbreviation ASAP? Generally, we think of it as in terms of even more hurry and stress in our lives. ASAP, as soon as possible. But maybe if we think of this abbreviation in a different manner, we will begin to find a new way to deal with those stressful days along the way and actually find peace and serenity instead. Think of it this way. There's work to do, deadlines to meet, you've got no time to spare, but as you hurry and scurry, ASAP, always say a prayer. In the midst of family chaos, quality time is rare. Do your best, let God do the rest. ASAP, always say a prayer. It may seem like your worries are more than you can bear. Slow down, take a breather. ASAP, always say a prayer. God knows how stressful life is. He wants to ease our cares, and He'll respond to all your needs. ASAP, always say a prayer. Requirement number one in being calm amidst the hectic, pressure-filled life, it's food. The peaceful heart is the heart that is first, spiritually well-fed. Requirement number two, obedience. As mentioned, the second thing that can drive sheep to distraction and keep them from rest are parasites. Those little annoying, irritating insects. And again, Keller writes, sheep, especially in summer, can be driven to absolute distraction by nasal flies, bot flies, warble flies, and ticks. When tormented by these pests, it is literally impossible for them to lie down and rest. Instead, they are up and on their feet, stamping their legs, shaking their heads, ready to rush off into the bush for relief from the pests. Only the diligent care of the owner who keeps constant lookout for these insects will prevent them from annoying his flock. A good shepherd will apply various types of insect repellents to his sheep. He will see that they are dipped to clear their fleeces of ticks, and he will see that there are shelter belts of trees and brush available where they can find refuge and release from their tormentors. Similarly, in the Christian life, there are bound to be many small irritations. There are the annoyances of petty frustrations and the ever-reoccurring disagreeable experiences. In modern terminology, we refer to this as being bugged. Basically, the second thing that keeps sheep and us from peace is little, tiny irritants. We can't rest because we're bugged, right? And these irritants, they have to be aggressively combated. And this suggests a couple of things. First, it raises the question of what little things we're often making into big things, right? As has been said, much of life comes down to learning what to ignore. You know? How much of our inability to find peace in our daily lives stems simply from our inability to just blow some things off, to let go of the things that don't really matter, and to keep our attention only on what does. You know, I'm reminded of the story of the woman who was out shopping one day with her little 3-year-old daughter, and as they passed the candy section, the child asked if she could have some. No, came her mother's reply, upon which the little girl began to cry and complain. Don't be upset, Janie, said the mother. I know you don't like shopping, but we only have a few aisles to go, then we can head home. In the next aisle, the little girl asked for a toy. When her mother refused, the child started throwing a tantrum. Come on, Janie, please try to be calm, said the mother. There's only one aisle to go, and we'll be back, and we'll be at the checkout. When they finally got to the checkout, the little girl was mesmerized by the goodies carefully placed to appeal to her compulsive buying. Again, Mom said no to a very huffy little girl. Janie, we'll be finished here in less than 5 minutes. Just hang on, and you can go home and have a lovely nap. As they packed the groceries in the car, a man approached them. Excuse me, madam, he said. I seem to find myself in the same aisle as you most of the time during the shopping, and I was right behind you at the checkout. I just wanted to let you know that I really admire how patient you are with little Janie. And the mother smiled and replied, oh, I'm afraid you've got it all wrong. My daughter's name is Allison. I'm Janie. To remain calm, you have to be able to keep your attention on what really matters and ignore what doesn't, you know? What's the old saying? Don't sweat the small stuff, and remember, it's all small stuff. You have to be able to blow all of that small stuff. But of course, this then does raise the other side of this issue, namely, what then is the small stuff, and what really is the big stuff, the stuff that really matters? Well, obviously, the stuff that most matters is whatever God wants, and this, I believe, is the second real point here. But the second reason why we often lack inner peace is because of these things that eat away at us. Not only the insignificant that we make significant, but far more the things that matter greatly to God that we aren't tending to. The ways our lives are not in accordance with God's will. Maybe it's tiny little ways, but we're not right, you know? As a great preacher once said, spiritual calm only comes after doing God's will, never before. Basically, you can't find peace outside of God's will. How do we lack peace? Secondly, because our lives are somehow outside of the desires, outside of the will of God, and it's eating away at us. We need to get right. You know? One author writes, when Leonardo da Vinci was painting The Last Supper, he became angry with a man and lashed out at him. He even threatened him. Then he went back to his fresco and tried to paint the face of Jesus. He couldn't, for there was too much evil stirring inside him. He couldn't get any work done. Eventually, the lack of peace forced him to put down his brushes, to go find the man, and to ask his forgiveness. Only then did he have the inner calm needed to paint the face of our Savior. How do our lives lack inner peace? Because we're continually being eaten away at the ways that we are outside of God's will, and we just need to get right. We're blaming other things. We're getting worked up about all sorts of extraneous issues. We're trying to fix other people, when the real problem is with us. We're just avoiding that. Requirement number 2 in remaining calm amidst the hectic, pressure-filled life: obedience. Which leads us into requirement number 3, joy. Third obstacle to peace for the sheep is friction within the flock. That is, basically, as the shepherd tries to get the sheep to lie down, they're all sort of jostling and pushing, trying to get the best part of the pasture, you know? It's a grasping, seeking lifestyle that ultimately just leaves them anxious and very frustrated. Third point here: how do we lack peace? Because we're so often grasping and seeking, so busy trying to get life, that we fail to just receive what's being offered. I mean, think about it this way. Think about the image created by our text this morning. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Notice, that's not only a practical image of food being provided to the flock, but an aesthetic image of beauty and pleasure. Picture a lush field, rolling hills. Imagine the colors, the serenity, the warm sun, the soft clouds. Imagine just sitting down. Imagine lying down and taking all that in. I believe this is the third great point that the author is trying to make here. It is a very careful choice of words. Very simply, life is meant to be enjoyed. That is, life is not just practical issues, things that must be sought and grasped and accomplished and gotten. It's also something just to be received and taken in. It's a gift. You know, there's an old saying, when you come to the end of your rope, tie a knot and swing. Right? That is, when life gets the better of you, receive and embrace and just to enjoy the gifts around you. People who know inner peace are people who regularly stop and just enjoy life, to take in the beauty, to just receive the gift, to laugh and to play. If you lack serenity, are you perhaps failing to do this? Failing to regularly stop and just enjoy life? One author writes, I am hereby officially tendering my resignation as an adult. I have decided I would like to return to being an 8-year-old again. I want to go to McDonald's and think that it's a 4-star restaurant. I want to sail sticks across fresh mud puddles and make ripples with rocks. I want to think M&Ms are better than money because you can eat them. I want to lie under a big oak tree and run a lemonade stand with my friends on a hot summer's day. I want to live simply again. I don't want my day to consist of nothing but computer crashes, mountains of paperwork, depressing news, how to survive more days in the month than there is money in the bank, doctor bills, gossip, illness, and the loss of loved ones. I want to know again the power of smiles, hugs, a kind word, truth, dreams, justice, the imagination, and making angels in the snow. And so, here is my checkbook and my car keys, my cell phone, my credit card bills, and my 401k statement. I am officially resigning from adulthood, and if you want to discuss this further, well, you'll have to catch me first because, tag, you're it. Requirement number 3, remaining calm amidst the hectic, pressure-filled life is joy. Are you making a point to just regularly stop and have fun? You know? And then finally, requirement number 4, trust. The final factor that can keep sheep from peace, from lying down to rest, is danger. As we noted last week, sheep are incredibly timid animals. If there's any sort of threat present, the shepherd cannot calm them down. And once again, don't we know this in our own lives? Whenever we have some sort of fear or anxiety, real or imagined, we can't rest. We're up all night, can't find peace. So what's the answer? Well, turning one last time to Keller's book, Keller notes that in calming fear within the flock, the primary thing that the shepherd does is he makes himself present. That is, the danger may still be out there, but the shepherd places himself in the center of the flock, and he tries to draw all their attention towards him, to keep their focus on him. And this, I believe, has two final points of application for us. First, it reminds us, as we've noted so often in the past, of the need to keep our focus on the Lord and not on our problems, on his power and not theirs. To be looking not at our hardships, but far more at how God is present within them and where God is present within them. But secondly, and even more, this reminds us that we need to keep our attention focused on the Lord, specifically in the sense of keeping our attention solely on his great love for us. Simply put, most people finally fail to know real peace because they fail to be at peace with the Lord. One of the great early Christians said, "The human heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee." What that means is that you can never truly know inner serenity until you know yourself right with your Creator, right with God, until you know his love within you. And the only way you take this in is by opening your whole life to God, all the good and all the bad, and accepting unconditionally his unconditional love for you in Jesus Christ. Unfortunately, what so happens is that we short-circuit this in some way. We lack this focus. Either we fail to completely open our lives to God, we hold back some shame or darkness, or we resist the forgiveness, believing it's too good to be true. Or maybe having received all this, we simply let ourselves lose sight of it amidst life's constant struggles. But whatever, the person who finally knows true inner peace is only the person who knows above all else, who focuses above all else on how deeply they are loved by God. That no matter what happens, they can remain calm because that overwhelming love is there and will do whatever is necessary to bring them through. People who are calm and peaceful in the midst of great stress and anxiety are those who finally are focused on how tremendously valuable they are, how much they are loved. Have you opened yourself to this? Are you focused on this above all else? Focused on the Lord, on how much he loves you in Jesus Christ. Christian author Thomas Milton writes, "There once was a young boy who was ill with an incurable disease. Month after month, his mother tenderly nursed him, read to him, and played with him, hoping to keep him from the dreadful finality of the doctor's diagnosis that he was going to die. As the weeks went on, he gradually began to understand that he would never be like the other boys he saw playing outside his window. Small as he was, he began to understand the meaning of the term death, and he too knew that he was going to die. One day his mother had been reading to him the stirring tale of King Arthur and his knights of the Round Table about the last glorious battle where so many knights met their death. As her little son sat silent for an instant, deeply stirred, she closed the book, and then he asked a question that was weighing on his young heart. 'Mama, what is it like to die? Does it hurt?' Tears sprang to her eyes and she fled to the kitchen, supposedly to tend to something on the stove. She knew this was a question with deep significance. She knew it must be answered satisfactorily. She leaned for an instant against the smooth surface of the counter, breathed a hurried prayer that the Lord would keep her from breaking down before her boy, that she'd be able to tell him the answer. The Lord did tell her. Immediately she knew how to explain it to him, so she returned to his room. 'Kenneth,' she said to her son, 'do you remember when you were a tiny boy, how you used to play so hard all day that when night came you were too tired even to undress, and you would tumble into your mother's bed and fall asleep? That was not your bed. It was not where you belonged. You would only stay there for a little while. Much to your surprise, you would wake up the next morning and find yourself in your own bed, in your own room. You were there because someone had loved you and had taken care of you. Your father had come with big, strong arms and had carried you away. Kenneth, death is like that. We just wake up some morning to find ourselves in the other room, our room, where we belong, because the Lord Jesus loves us and died for us that this life might not be the end.' The boy's shining face looked up into hers and told her that the point had hit home and that there would be no more fear, only love and trust in his little heart as he went to meet his heavenly Father. He never questioned again. Several weeks later, he fell asleep in death, And just as she had said, his heavenly Father's big, strong arms carried him to his own room. Requirement number 4, in remaining calm amidst the hectic, pressure-filled life. Focus. Focus on the Lord, on his overwhelming love for you above all else, that no matter what happens, he is there and he will bring you through. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. The promise of God's providing for all our needs, most especially the provision of calm and serenity amidst a frequently very hectic and stress-filled life. Do you often lack inner peace, life outrunning your soul? Slow down and let your soul catch up. Feed on the Lord, obey his will, enjoy the gift, and focus on his love.